I got tired of walking around with a mask on, smiling but my heart singing sad songs. Yeah, I was living for myself, I was dead wrong till I got the call, no cell phone. Man, you talking to the real me.
Okay, so Martin, thank you so much for coming on to the Uncompromised Podcast. Just to give you some context in the background of it, if you haven't kind of seen the stuff that I've done already, it's a podcast that really looks at everything controversial within and outside of the fitness industry for men who have gone from some relative period in their life where they've been compromising themselves, they've had poor, low personal standards, to some kind of relative success. And that's the kind of theme of the guests that I got on here from all different walks of life. And I'm trying to create it as a platform so that guys who maybe are in that starting position and want to get to somewhere where they can create an identity shift, that they can get advice from guys who have kind of been in their shoes and done the do. So in that sense, I'll let you introduce yourself in terms of your background, but I'd love to kind of just start on your background and history in the military, if that's okay with you, and just give us a little bit of context of where you were before you were the Built to Lead coach.
Superb, Andy. Really be looking forward to having a conversation with you today and sharing some insights. And if people take a bit of inspiration from it, then fantastic. I'm all for it. My background, so right now, I'm, I suppose, the Built to Lead coach is what you describe me as there. So I run a program called the Built to Lead program. I primarily work with people in leadership roles. So it's business owners, coaches, managers, people who work in leadership roles and just want to stretch themselves in all aspects of life, not just physically, but really, really stretch themselves in terms of their personal development. What brought me to that primarily and fundamentally was my military career. So I joined the military 2 weeks after my 17th birthday. It was off the back of a successful boxing career. So I was a high performance boxer. I represented Ireland on numerous occasions all over the world, but I was very light, very skinny. I was extremely underweight. I was actually only 8 stone the day I joined the army. So I had a lot of insecurities. I had a lot of, I suppose, mental barriers and issues when I first joined the army. I didn't feel like I fitted in. I felt different. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like I didn't belong in that environment because I stood out like a sore thumb, as completely different to everyone else. But what I learned was the army was the right environment that I needed to be in to stretch myself, because it's like you said there at the start of the podcast, I was surrounded by grown men who were challenging themselves, who were pushing themselves. It wasn't about the pound note that they earned at the end of the week. It was all about how they can challenge themselves physically, mentally, and emotionally. And that really stood out to me. And I just found it as an environment where I could really stretch myself and challenge myself in any capacity that I wanted to. If I wanted to challenge myself mentally to the extremes, the military would facilitate that. If I wanted to challenge myself physically to my extremes and beyond, the military would facilitate that. And that's what I really bought into. I had a successful career for over 17 and a half years. I was an operational sniper. So the sniper course would be, I suppose, like the pinnacle infantry course, because it's such a high failure rate. Like on average, 85 to 90% of people who attempt a sniper course will fail it. Whereas I was one of the people who was lucky enough to succeed and pass that. And I just took a lot from the standards that I was able to set, but also the standards that I was able to extract from the sniper course. And that resonated a lot into a lot of the other courses that I did within the military. I worked in a leadership role for 15 of those 17 and a half years, right up until, working with, 7 or 8 people from a recruit platoon, right up to 90 people in an overseas operation, on the blue line between Lebanon and Israel would have been one of my biggest, I suppose, operational appointments or operational taskings. And it was at that stage where I just felt I'd built up a lot of experience, a lot of expertise, and I transitioned into the fitness industry and then further field more so from a mental performance perspective. So the program that I run today, yes, I help people from a physical perspective, but primarily we help people with their belief systems as well. I'm a certified mental performance coach. My wife, she's a rapid transformational therapist. So our whole, I suppose, goal and concept is to help people to make rapid changes very, very quick to this. And it's going to resonate into other aspects of their life. Obviously, people are listening back on podcasts, so I pointed to my head when I said help people make changes to this. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's pretty much me.
That's amazing. And obviously, we've known each other for quite a few years now. And when I first heard your story, it was fascinating because we've got a lot in interest in terms of, the boxing aspect of things. And I guess I want to pull it back a little bit even further than before the military, because a question that I ask every guy that comes on here that's now successful, knows himself, has what I call an uncompromised identity. You know yourself. What period of your life were you perhaps compromising yourself in terms of your standards? I know you said you were, a skinny young lad, but was there kind of a mental barrier and limiting beliefs that you had around yourself at that time before the military?
Yeah, absolutely. Even before I joined the military, boxing would have been like my body armor. Essentially, it was like a form of protection. I was an overachiever. Like I pushed myself. I trained extremely hard. I trained harder than anyone else that would be in the gym with me. There's guys, I don't know, maybe they listen to this podcast, maybe they won't, but I trained on an average team with guys like Andy Lee, Carl Frampton, TJ Doheny, all guys that went on to be world champions. And even when we were doing fitness tests and things, I always would have outlasted those guys, but it always would have stemmed from a place of insecurity. I do understand that now. And the reason being is I had a huge amount of shame to how I looked. I had a huge amount of shame to my physique, and it massively impacted my confidence. Like I never lived with true self-confidence until probably the age of 23 or 24. And I boxed from a very, very young age. And I would have had, other kids even looking up to me in the gym from a very, very young age, because the gym that I trained in, I was their first ever Irish champion. So that was a pretty big deal, within the school, within the gym, within the local environment. I would have been the only Irish champion in the town that we live in, But at the same time, a lot of it came from a place of insecurity because I had a huge amount of shame to how I looked from a physical perspective. I have a huge birthmark on the side of my face. So obviously, whenever you grow up, you're underweight, you're skinny, and you've got a birthmark on the side of your face. It's a recipe it's a recipe for negative comments. It's a recipe for, jests and name calling and things like that, So a lot of it would have stemmed for them. And like a lot of people, that's why I got into fitness. That's why I went on this kind of like journey to challenge myself physically, to just become, I suppose, a more robust version of myself, where I could develop that confidence in myself, and it could resonate into other aspects of my life.
100%. Yeah. I mean, the whole reason that I kind of niched down into just working with men, because I had a very similar experience myself growing up. Like I was rake skin thinny. I was playing rugby against guys who were just, literally 3 or 4 times bigger than me and heavier than me. And I had a very similar kind of like complex, but also felt that chip on your shoulder of like something to prove. And the reason I kind of worked and niched down into working with who I work with now, and even though they're grown men and they might still be in that kind of mindset, to help them realize and get guys like you on the podcast and the program that doesn't matter what stage you're at, when you overcome those limiting mindset beliefs, that's the key to then unlocking the high performance in other areas that you now want, whether it's, so in the Uncompromised program, we look at you as the person in terms of your emotional stability, relationships, the physique, obviously your actual health and physical performance, and your profession, because understanding that your physique is the firing pin in both of those areas, and that mentality, it's like, doesn't matter where you've started, you can make a change in terms of improving in those areas if you just take the time to understand yourself. And even when I talk about, I've spoken about this on another podcast, like the inner child side of stuff, and understanding kind of how your belief systems have been formed. When you can understand yourself, your emotional triggers, you can kind of break the cycle of maybe coping mechanisms, self-destructive habits that are stopping you from getting to that. And that's something that I wanted to pick on with you to really unpack, because I know in the military, they literally have this process of almost, say, breaking you down, but pulling you back to your raw kind of emotion to be able to build you back up again. And that's something that I wanted to ask you about. So what is the process of that like for guys, especially like yourself, going in there at, was it 17 you said you went in?
17, 2 weeks,
yeah.
2 weeks after my 70th birthday, yeah.
What does that look like, and what was that like for you?
For me at the time, it was the typical military process of breaking myself down to build myself up.
Yeah.
And at the time, I didn't understand it from a physiological perspective. I didn't understand it from a psychological perspective, the changes that my body and my mind were going through. But it was after a period of time. It wasn't like immediate change that I noticed in myself. It was like this cumulative change over time, where I just stopped and reflected and realized I've kind of transitioned into this different person. It wasn't like this light bulb where it's like I don't feel as insecure anymore. It was a process, and the process was exactly like you said. My belief systems had been shifted. I had these limiting beliefs about the person that I was, and they, like you said, were ingrained from childhood. The average person they form beliefs about who they are by the age of 8. So if someone believes that, they're born into an overweight family and all of their family are overweight and they're going to be overweight for the rest of their life, those beliefs are typically formed by the age of 8 years old. And for me, I had this belief system that I was this skinny person, that I was this, person who didn't have like the physical presence or the authority that other people might have had in the military. And I shifted and I changed those belief systems. It's the very same thing, like you mentioned here, that we focus on a lot within the coaching program, because my wife's a rapid transformation therapist. A lot of what we do would be hypnotherapy based. And every single time someone works with us and they've got a limiting belief, it goes back to childhood. They go back to a specific moment in their life, whether it's they have a limiting belief around public speaking. They don't have the confidence to get up and speak. The first time that they were made feel a certain way was when they were 6, 7, 8 years old in that classroom. They stood up and spoke and everyone laughed. And they attached so much pain to that they said to themselves, I'm never, ever, ever going there again. It's the very same with our physical presence. Like a lot of people, whenever they feel that, I'm not going to get dressed around the guys because the last time that happened, people would laugh at me. That's the way I was in the military. Like I would have had a lot of shame around getting showered around other men, around getting dressed around other men. And the reason being is the fact that I was one of the smallest guys on the boxing team. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of shame attached to that because guys would have laughed. They would have said, Jesus Christ, like there's not a pick on you. You're like a rasher. You've got no muscle. These are things that would have been said to me. So I attached so much pain to that I just attached negativity, limiting beliefs around that particular aspect of my life, Mm-hmm. And it's like you said there, when you shift your belief systems, it's never going to be an immediate light bulb moment. Yeah, it's more cumulative, that you just realize that you reflect at a certain stage, you realize I'm a different person,
And was there any, I know you said like it's very much gradual and I 100% agree with that, but were there any kind of major milestones and turning points that you can remember where you recognize that shift and change in yourself? Because this is something I try and get my guys really aware of in terms of like how often do men celebrate the wins and their own successes? They constantly feel like they're not achieving, right? Even if they are. And it's like something I try and bring into my program, my coaching specifically, is opportunities to reflect, because a lot of guys don't naturally do it. So was there any kind of major milestones for you that looking back now, you think, okay, yeah, I turned a corner at that point. I got confident.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the biggest turning points for me in my life, would have actually been whenever I was 18 going on 19 years old. I was serving overseas in Liberia. So that's in West Africa, like really, really, really warm country, war-torn country, third world country, really testing conditions. We were living in tents for 6 months of the year. And it's where I kind of like matured. It was almost like a tribe mentality. I feel, and even when my parents said it, I feel I went out a boy and I came back a man. And whenever I came back from there, I can remember one of my company sergeants, he says, look, I think that you've got good leadership qualities, because whenever I was overseas, I always put myself forward. I challenged myself. I pushed myself outside my comfort zone as much as I possibly could with a lot of the operations and jungle patrols and things like that. He says, I'm going to put you forward for a leadership course. It's called an NCO course, okay? Now, the criteria to get that course is you must be in the army a minimum of 2 years. You must have an overseas operation completed, and you must have 5 weapons courses completed. I was in a 1.5 years, so I didn't tick that box. I had an overseas operation completed, and I only had 2 weapons courses done. So they ran a preliminary course, right? There was like nearly 40 or 50 people applied for the course, but there was only 8 places for our unit. And my CS says, you know what? Go on the course. The course is going to be very, very testing. He says, but I genuinely believe that you will outlast those guys. And if you outlast those guys, you're going to get picked for the course. And just someone actually having that belief in me, that was the biggest turning point in my life. It was the first time throughout all my boxing career, no matter how much trophies I won, that was the first time where someone threw down a challenge, a gauntlet to me, but said, don't let me down. I'm backing you to pass this course. Don't let me down. Those were his exact words. And straight away I felt like, you know what? This guy believes in me. I'm not going to let him down. I put my heart and soul into passing that course. And I went on and I did the NCO's course. I was on it with experienced snipers. I was on it with a lot of other experienced leaders, guys that were in the military for 15 years. They had 5, 6 tours of operation overseas. I was awarded the best overall soldier at the end of that course. And the reason I overachieved, in my opinion, or achieved great levels of success on it, it's number 1, someone believed in me. And number 2, someone set me a challenge and I didn't want to let them down. And for me, that was essential for helping me to shift my belief systems, but it was also essential for helping me to stretch myself and grow and develop as a man, you know?
That's amazing. And it's like when I hear guys like you have gone through such amazing achievements like that and like monumental kind of against the odds things, which is, I've had a few, I've had Scott McDonald on the podcast talking about his marathon de sables and stuff like that. And it's like, I try and articulate this to my clients is that as a coach, like we're not here to really tell you what to do, but show you that we believe in you. And that's something that a lot of guys have not had before. At least when I work with the guys that I work with, they always say like, why do you believe in me? Why are you backing me? I'm like, because I've been through a process of change myself. And I think that's really important to coach from that authentic place. But I've helped other guys do exactly that. I can see you here and I know you can get to here. And it's like, if someone can create that roadmap for you, plays such a big part in creating not just a physical transformation, but that identity shift, because the coach almost has to be able to stretch that vision past where they can see themselves. And it sounds like that's what that guy had done for you, even though there was a little bit of not doubt, but you were like, me, I'm up against some good guys here. And, just managed to pull through it.
It's so true. Like you even mentioned there, like guys like Scott and Mark Rhodes and these guys that have completed like incredible physical feats like that. Like they didn't pluck it from thin air. They didn't fall out of bed one morning and say, I'm going to become the guy that's going to test myself in one of the most intense, foot races on earth. At some stage, those guys had someone that believed in them. And I guarantee it's a very, very similar start point for them where someone pushed them, someone believed in them. And what I always say to people, everyone is a mentor. Every single person, whether they're a positive or negative influence in your life, they're mentoring you, they're influencing you to some degree or to some capacity. Like that guy who was my company sergeant, he could have been completely different towards me. If his attitude was different, there was different outcomes for me. His attitude to me was, I'm backing you, don't let me down. I genuinely feel that you've got the leadership qualities. I genuinely feel you've got the ability to go on this course and outlast any of these guys. Some of these guys, they're in the army 15 years, they wouldn't lace your boots. That was a conversation we had. And I came out of there and I felt 10 foot tall. I felt like I could walk on water purely based on the words that this guy was saying. Mm-hmm. Whereas if I went into the office and the same guy said to me, I don't think you should apply for this course. I think you're going to be completely wasting your time. These guys are in the army 15 years. You wouldn't lace their boots. The impression that he would have had on me would have been completely different. And I would have come out of the office and I probably would have said, you know what? He's right. Why even try? What's the point? And every single person is a mentor, but you have to be so selective with the people that you let into your life, and they have to be a positive influence. And like if you're a guy listening back to this and you haven't got that positive influence in your life, you haven't got that, whether it's a male figure, whether it's an authority figure, whether it's a leader figure, if you haven't got that in your life, then what do you do? And I'm very clear with people like that, straight into the chops, like, what are you actually doing with your life? Because every single one of us, myself included, we need positive influences, because those positive influences, they form our belief systems, they stretch us, they set goals beyond measure what we feel that we're capable of achieving, and there's no stage of your life where you shouldn't want to be a part of something like that,
Yeah, 100% agree with you, mate. That's, more recently since I transitioned just to online coaching, I run 4 in-person events a year just for that sake of like being part of something community-wise that you want to have something to look forward to. We had our last event in October here in Marbella, and it was, the guys were coming out and saying like, oh my God, I needed this so much. I just needed a breath of fresh air where I'm not just going to the pub every weekend and seeing the same faces, chatting the same shit, doing, and it's, I think because we've been in this environment for so long, it's so normal for us to be around influential people who are like-minded. But for the general guy that, I work with, you maybe work with, it's like, it's such a new thing to come into something like a coaching program where the normal behavior is the desired behavior as such. And that can really create huge shifts for people in itself. And I wanted to really ask you about what it was like for you, because, we talked about identity shifts and a lot of, in terms of how I look at my clients, personal, physical, professional, I've had multiple guys, similar age to me, mid-20s, late 20s, early 30s, who have come in the program and then gone, Andy, working with you's made me actually realize that I don't want to do my job. I don't like my job. It's unfulfilling. And obviously you've had that actual experience of going from one, not extreme, but being, really successful in the military to then becoming a coach. So what was that transition like for you? And what advice could you give to someone, this is a double-loaded question, who is looking to change their career and create a shift in that sense?
Yeah, the big thing for me was I went through that, I suppose, stage where I call it like reinventing myself. This is the same as what you did, essentially. You know, like you're a leader now who runs events in Marbella. So people are going to look up to you. People are going to be inspired by you, and you're stretching people's vision by that. Like people are looking at you and are saying, you know, you might have guys that went to school with you or are saying, well, look at this guy, and he's over Marbella and he's running events and he's bringing guys out there and he's helping change their lives. And I suppose for me, it was the very same thing. You know, I probably looked at people like you, you know, in similar circumstances to what you're in right now. And I said to myself, you know what? There's qualities I have, there's skills that I have. What makes them any different to me? What makes them different to me is that they're taking the risks. What makes them different to me is that they have purpose to their day and they're living it, you know, whereas for me, I always classed myself as like a driven person. I always classed myself as like a really, really growth-minded person. But at the same time, I wasn't showing it anywhere near as much as I could be because I was still working for someone else. I was still being massively undervalued in terms of how much I was being paid for the role that I was completing. I was still being told who I need to lead, how I need to lead, when I need to lead them. I had no influence in terms of how creative I could be as a leader within the military because everything is very, very, very structured around syllabus. So for me, it was trying to kind of like break away from that. Mm-hmm. And it's at that stage, probably around 2019, where I just realized that I needed to kind of like reinvent myself. Yeah. And that's exactly what I did. You know, I had it as a side hustle first. And I recommend anyone that's listening to this, you do that because it's going to allow you to build a bit of confidence. It's going to allow you to develop a little bit of skin in the game. It's going to allow you to understand a little bit more about the new career that you're looking to transition into, whether that's a career or whether that's a business. So there was a slow process for me for around 12 months where I did that, where I used it as a side hustle. And I just, like, I suppose, built up a portfolio of clients and results. And confidence as well. You know, I built my confidence. I built a level of resilience, you know, because when you become a self-employed business owner, there's a huge amount of uncertainty. And I find that that's one of the needs that people struggle to cope with the most is, you know, the uncertainty around the market, the uncertainty around the economy in the world, the uncertainty around the undulation and how much they earn on a month-to-month basis. And that gave me the opportunity to kind of like learn and develop in areas like that, essentially. So whenever I made that transition, I was a little bit more comfortable. Now, whenever I say I was comfortable, I'm not going to lie and say that the transition was smooth. There was still a huge amount of sleepless nights, right? I still had the same fears that every single business owner has. I feared that I would lose my business. I feared that it was a dream. I was going to wake up in the morning and everything would just be taken away from me. It's like I was waiting for someone to knock on my door and say that the game is over. And most importantly, I had a massive fear that I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
And the advice that I would give to anyone is that if you're in a position right now where there's something you want to change in your life, primarily your career, because it's going to take up a huge amount of your time, it's probably going to be the one thing that's going to dictate how you feel emotionally on a day-to-day basis is the career that you're working in right now. And you want to change that. The reason you haven't done it is because you're telling yourself you're not good enough. That's the single most important limiting belief that you need to work on, that you need to overcome before you make a transition, is back yourself, believe in yourself, and understand that you're good enough. Okay. And like you said, it's programs like yours. It's the best place to be. That's going to help you and support you to build that belief system, build that true self-confidence where you can make that transition in your life, you know?
That's amazing. It's interesting to hear, like, because like from surface level, people who say, look at your success and what you've done on the outside would never know that you've gone through those feelings. And that's so probably transparent compared to a lot of male only coaches online, because I think you get, like, I've spoke about this before on the first podcast I did about this, is I wanted it to be unspoken topics that a lot of the guys are thinking, but probably not actually having the space to talk about. And, you know, however you call it, mental health or just limiting beliefs or those kind of doubts, everyone feels them. And I'm so open about my own mistakes, how I feel, how I still feel like that on my socials, because I still get guys messaging me now. They might not join the program, whatever, but they're like, thank you, mate. That post you put out really resonated with me. And there's not a lot of people that are actually singing that song. And I think it's really important just for guys who have achieved like success or even just got past that initial limiting belief to start is the biggest thing. And it's the same with fitness. It's like, if you just actually fucking start, like, it's going to be ugly. It's not going to be pretty at the beginning, but you just need to actually take that step.
Mm-hmm.
How old were you when you actually made that transition?
I was 33 years old. So, and what was really, really troublesome for me, and I guarantee a lot of guys that are looking to kind of make transitions with their career probably resonate with this, is I was a bit institutionalized in the fact that I was employed for my whole adult life. And you know what? As much as people take inspiration from people that are in the military or people, you know, that do incredible things with their physical body and stuff like that, I genuinely feel being a self-employed business owner, from a mental perspective, it's one of the most testing environments that you can put your mind and your body into. Because in the military, I done like extremely, extremely intense courses, you know, things like sniper courses where you will put your body to the absolute limit. You know, you would go out into a mountain and you'd be sleep deprived and you'd be like doing marches after marches after marches, covering miles and miles and miles with a small house on your back, week after week, day after day. And it never took an ounce out of me. And the reason being is I had certainty. I knew I was getting paid at the end of the week. I knew I lived within my means. I knew I could afford to pay my bills, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas whenever you're self-employed, that certainty is taken away to a certain degree. And that can really, really challenge a lot of people, you know, where they do create a huge amount of self-doubt that they've never really experienced before. For me, the doubts that I would have experienced before in the military career, there was always a blueprint that can help me to overcome them. So for example, if I had a fear of failure on a sniper course, there's a blueprint of how I can succeed within that. Whereas in business, it's a little bit different, because even the people that you're reaching out to for the blueprint, they're still navigating their own way. They're still growing their own business. They still have to deal with the uncertainty, the loneliness, the isolation. They still have to deal with all of those problems on a day-to-day basis as well. So having support, having a network, having people that you can just soundboard things off and say, you know what, it's good to hear that someone else actually feels like that as well. It's so important, you know.
100%. It was actually some of the topics of conversation that we had with the guys that came out to Marbella in October was amazing, because I've got guys from, you know, mid-20s up to 60, a couple of guys who are just starting to retire now, and, you know, really successful business owners. They're, you know, multimillionaires in finance, accountants by trade, and they were giving us the younger guys a lot of feedback around, like, you know, when I talk about guys who have self-destructive habits, within my program, we focus on the four main ones that I see, and it's overworking as an avoidance strategy, coping mechanism through alcohol or drugs, comfort eating, and then people pleasing. They're the kind of main four patterns that I see within guys, and they're just coping mechanisms for different stress triggers and stimuluses, right? And one of the biggest stimuluses that we identified was, you know, like most people will go through, financial pressure. Yeah. You know, the fear of, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, there's a lot of guys like that in the program. You know, where's the next sale coming from? Where's the next client coming from? And they were able to articulate and shed a lot of light around, like, okay, they stretched our whole visions. You know, I'm the coach in the program, but they got so much more life experience than me in terms of finance. And some of the things they were saying and stretching our visions around, we were talking about, okay, I want to hit, say, this amount of net income by time of 35. They were like, no. Where do you want to be where you're 45, 50? And they stretched that vision for everyone there. And it's like you said, with the community and having the right people around you, it's, if you are experiencing those limiting beliefs, whether it's in a personal issue or the business or financial, whatever it is, like having someone to be able to stretch that and give you that guidance, it was invaluable. And it was great to be part of, me as well, be part of a network of guys where it's like everyone's just giving value. And it's you just can't beat something like that, I don't think, when you're looking to grow across the board, not just physically, but mentally.
Absolutely. And it's like you even touched on there, like you brought people to Marbella. There's, you know, a gap between age, between the youngest guy, the oldest guy. There's probably a gap between success within their career between the youngest guy and the oldest guy. There's probably a gap between the finances that they've earned over a period of time.
Definitely.
But where the common ground is always going to be is how people feel emotionally on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
My wife does a huge amount of sessions. Rapid transformational therapy is very different to other styles of therapy. It helps people make massive breakthroughs very, very quick. So in like a 90-minute session, you know, people go through an absolute roller coaster of emotions where they can make massive breakthroughs in a short space of time. And in the consultation process, whenever you're dissecting what people's problems are, you're dissecting, you know, where this problem is showing up in their life. What's the habits? What's the triggers? When you're dissecting what that person wants, how do they want life to look? It doesn't matter if it's someone that's earning 30 grand a year, right up to someone that runs a multi-million-dollar company, okay? Do you know what the commonality always is? I just want to feel content. I just want to feel happy. I just want to feel present. I don't want to feel like I always have to be thinking about what's next. It's the simple things like that. How I want to feel. That's what it always comes back to. That person is there to want to call because how they want to feel. People in your program, the guys that are in your program, they want to change how they want to feel. People that are listening to this that are probably not in your program, right? They might be bullshitting themselves that it's something else that they need in their life. It's something else that's going to make them feel a certain way or whatever. Whereas in reality, it's not. It's that state of content. It's that state of calm. It's that state of being present within themselves. That's what they're searching for. But sometimes they just don't realize it, you know?
When you came out of the military, did you have a little, you said you were feeling of like institutionalized in that sense? Like, did you have a little bit of, what's the word I'm looking for? Like distortion in terms of feeling and finding that those feelings of contentness and safety?
Yeah, absolutely. The reason being is, as Mike Tyson says, you know, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So I had this great plan. You know, whenever I left the military, I left in August, and, you know, between August and December, I had these financial targets that I was going to hit. I had this great vision for where my program was going to go, where I'd start to employ staff and bring people in. And then my wife, she was diagnosed, like she was under a lot of pain at the time. She was working as a hairdresser. She was on her feet 24/7. And it's like her immune system was just breaking down day by day. She was under a lot of pain. Her energy was extremely low. We couldn't get to the bottom of what the issue was. She'd seen various consultants, and it turned out that she was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, spondylosis, okay? And what actually that done for her is it completely broke her immune system down to the point where she had to build it back up gradually over a period of time. So she had to step away from her job. Mm-hmm. So in the space of 4 months, and we have 2 young kids, we had a mortgage, you know, all of the stresses and worries and concerns that every single other parent has, okay? But now we were in a position where we went from full-time employment, where I had this job in the army and it was pensionable and I had my wage coming in every single week. And my wife was in the very, very same. She just completed a manager's course. And now all that is completely gone. And everything is on your shoulders. There's that reliant on you to bring in the income on a week-to-week basis. There's that reliance on you to turn up and perform. And you know what? We wouldn't wish for it any other way, because we genuinely believe everything happens for a reason. And at the time, I didn't think like that because it felt shit. At the time, there were sleepless nights. At the time, there was that fear that it's all going to come crashing down. There was that fear that I'm not good enough to do this because I've never done it before. Where was the proof that I had that I could run a successful business? Where's the proof that I had that I could bring my wife into the business and we could have this successful business that we had today? There was no proof to show that. I had to create the proof. I didn't realize that at the time, you know, because if I did realize that, and if I knew exactly what the outcome was going to be, I wouldn't have been stressed. I wouldn't have been worried. I wouldn't have felt anxious. I wouldn't have been having sleepless nights. But I genuinely look back now, and hindsight is a great thing. And I realize, you know what? Everything happens for a reason. You are when you are in life, and you're meant to be where you are right now. And sometimes whenever you feel that bit of discomfort, just remind yourself it's because you're stretching yourself. It's very easy to go back into your comfort zone. Like for me, I always reminded myself of that. If my business didn't work out, I'm willing to go digging roads. There's no job above me. You know, I will put food, I'll do what I have to do to put food on the table for my family. But at the end of the day, whenever you feel that discomfort, it's a really, really, really good thing. And lean into that discomfort is the advice that I would give people, you know?
Yeah, that's absolute gold, mate. I think this is something that I see in a lot of guys, because you know, I talk about this a lot on the podcast. We're all driven by some form of status in some shape or form, of whether it's your status and ability as a dad, whether it's your status in work amongst your friends, whatever. And I think a lot of guys, particularly in like the younger guys that I work with now, and even I say younger, even like 2-3 years younger than me, there's this expectation that guys don't seem to want to do the legwork anymore. And they just want to be at the destination without going through that transitional period. And I say to some of the guys that come on board, you know, like, so you got 15 kilos body fat to lose. This is just from a physical perspective. You know, this isn't just, I don't want you to just think about how quickly we can get this off. It's like, okay, how are we now putting the big rocks, the foundations in place so that when we get to that 15 kilos off, you don't really have to change anything in your life. This is a complete lifestyle change. You know, the only thing you might have to adjust is portion control, but you're eating the same foods that helped you lose the weight. And it's the same thing with guys that's talking about wanting to shift careers. It's like they are so even though they're unhappy, they're in the comfort zone of a job that they're familiar with, and they might be good at it even if they don't like it. And that fear of going into a job where they're new and a beginner again, they don't want to be perceived as that new person because it affects their status. And that's a huge thing that I see in guys at the minute, particularly the younger generations, who just don't seem to want to start from the beginning again. And am I right in thinking when you were in the military, you actually trained people up afterwards? Were you training people as a coach in the military for the sniper stuff?
Yeah, so like my main role in the military would have always been as an instructor or in a leadership role. Essentially, you know, I always would have worked with people where I was testing people to the hilt, and we would have seen a lot of that in the military, because the way the military is structured, okay, is if you're an instructor on a course or in a specific area of expertise, people have to value your opinion, your area of expertise. People have to value the syllabus. They have to value the area that you're testing them in. And I could have instructed people that were 3, 4, 5 ranks ahead of me. And at times it can be a very humbling experience for them, because they have to be that beginner again. And they have to be humbled in the aspect that someone that is deemed below me is now telling me what to do, is now instructing me, is now challenging me, is now pushing me to my, you know, absolute extremes in certain cases on different courses and stuff like that. I found that's where the military really did prepare me mentally for that, where you're never too proud to be a beginner again. You're never too proud to, you know, get your hands dirty. You're never too proud to shed the skin and go again. And every single person needs that, because you're constantly going through a stage of reinventing yourself in life. Your values are always shifting. Like my values when I was 20 to now are completely different in terms of what I was doing 3 years ago to what I'm doing now is completely different. You know, touch wood, what I'm doing in 5 years to what I'm doing right now will be completely different. Why? Because you're always going through stages of where you're reinventing yourself. The way I kind of explain it is, it's like, you know, you have this wall, you get out of bed every single morning. If you visualize, you step outside your front door, every single one of us that are listening to this right now, we've got the bricks, we've got the cement, we've got the yellow work hat sitting on the wall every single day. And you've got an opportunity to put the yellow work hat on and start building your wall. All right. Brick by brick by brick, your mind will find the right brick if you look for the right brick. But if you choose not to look for the right brick, if you choose to leave the work hat sitting on the wall, or even if you choose to kick your wall down, okay, then you're going to be still making changes to your life, but it's not going to be the changes you want to see. When people speak about the comfort zone, they describe it as this place where no change happens. Change happens. People that are inside their comfort zone are getting fatter every single day of the week. People that are inside their comfort zone, their mental health is degrading every single day of the week. Their mood, how reactive they are around their family, that is intensifying every single day of the week. Why? Because they're inside their comfort zone. They're losing or diminishing the level of purpose that they have in their life. And if they want that purpose back, and if they want to feel different, like you said, it takes effort. It takes a shift in your attitude. It takes a shift in your effort. It takes a shift in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. And you have to get outside your comfort zone. You have to start building that wall up and choosing the right bricks if you want that, you know?
100%. Yeah, it's something that I've really tried to put out in content or marketing, whatever you want to call it, just for guys. Like, this isn't going to be easy. Like, if you want to really make a change, you know, and really draw on kind of, you know, we talk about this often, is like you're either moving towards pleasure or away from pain. And usually the guys who are in a lot of pain stay in pain, avoiding getting out of that pain because it's more comfortable than the discomfort of changing, right? Mm-hmm. And I think something that really benefited me was actually, getting really clear on what my core values and beliefs were, because you can almost shape and build that lifestyle around, in terms of, like we said, about stretching that vision, creating a lifestyle that's around your core values and beliefs. And I think for a lot of guys, when you ask them that question, like, okay, well, what do you value? What do you believe in? A lot of them, they can't actually tell you, because they've not taken the time to do, can call it inner work if you want, but take the time to actually really be honest with themselves and understand themselves. What advice could you give to people who, like you said, your values change all the time? What advice could you give to people to be able to really recognize and understand what their current set of values and beliefs are?
Yeah, I suppose for me, if I was to go back and kind of like recognize what my values were and where they were shifting at different stages of life, I almost just looked at how I feel on a day-to-day basis, how my day looks, and how I would like my day to look. And I'll give you a really good understanding of what you actually value and how much of a disconnect there is between what you're doing currently in your life and what you actually value and how you would like your life to look. People will come to me at times, even on the initial call, and they would say, I'm just extremely unhappy in my life. And I'm like, well, what would you like to change in your life? And they're like, I don't know. That's the thing. I genuinely don't know what it is I want to change. And I'm like, well, what would you like to let go of? What is it that you don't want in your life anymore? So if you're in a position where you're listening to this, and maybe you don't even understand what your values are, because values, it is a deep subject. It's not very much surface level.
Yeah.
If you ask the average person walking the street, what do you value in your life? Straight away, you've put them on the spot. They can't answer that question, okay? So it is a kind of a deep subject, and it is an area where people need to be educated on. It's an area where people need to be probably guided through a process on that's beyond, the remit of this podcast. But what I would say is just ask yourself a simple question. What's the things that I don't want in my life anymore? What's the things that I'm sick and tired of? What's the standards that I'm no longer willing to accept for myself? What's the area of my life that if I was still here in 5 years down the road, that I would hate it? There was we run events, all of the time within the program and outside the program. And my wife ran an event a couple of months back, and I was speaking at it. And I remember there's one lady, she came to the event and she stood up, she grabbed the microphone and she said, you know what? She goes, I'm here today for one reason. She said, I'm here today because I hate my social life. She goes, I feel that I've lost myself in the last number of years and I've got no social life. I don't really have friends. I don't really have a network. I don't really have people where I just feel, you know what? They support me. She goes, it's all just work. And I says, okay, what do you want from life? She says, that's the thing. I don't know. She goes, I don't know what it is that I want. She goes, I just know that I want a better social life. And I said, well, what happened to you that actually put you in a position where your social life just went downhill, essentially, And she said, I don't really know. She goes, like, I've been through like a messy divorce, and as a result of that, I don't really leave the house. And it's like she just had this aha moment where it's like, well, I've went through this messy divorce. I don't really leave the house anymore. And I says, okay, what I want you to do now is I want you to stop at that specific moment, okay? And I want you to look at your life as it is today. Fast forward 5 years. In 5 years from now, you've got the same social life. Describe how it looks. She says, oh, miserable, boring, pathetic. She used all of these really extreme words that just explain the dull life. And I'm like, so you don't want miserable, you don't want boring, you don't want pathetic in your life anymore. Is that true? She's like, absolutely. So what do you want? Oh, I want a bit of excitement. I want a bit of adventure. I want to be able to travel. Where? Do you travel? Do you like traveling in cities? Do you like travel sun? Oh, sun, whatever. By the end of the event, she came back up this and she's like, okay, here's my bucket list. Here's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to get out. I'm going to go to more events like this. I'm going to travel. I'm going to see 3 cities in Europe this year. It's like she just created this little almost like goal for herself over the course of the year. Because I always say goals is creating your future. If you set a goal, you've created your future in terms of how it looks, So just to come back to that question and to summarize it, because it probably went off in a bit of a tangent there.
That's great.
If you're in a position right now where you're unhappy with where you are in life, you don't really understand what it is you value in life, you don't really understand the direction that you want to take your life, you don't really even understand what's a career that you would love to have, ask yourself, what do I not want in my life anymore? Write it down, journal on, this is the things that I do not want in my life anymore. If those things are still in your life in 5 years, how's your life going to look? And I guarantee, even just with that information, it gives you a thirst to take massive action on it.
Mate, that's really powerful. It's almost like, in very much like layman's simple terms, it's like write down and do the opposite. Like, what is the polar opposite of what you're now experiencing is an easy way to look at that. And I think a lot of guys struggle to do that. And that's why I've got a coach. Other people hire coaches as well, because going back to that whole stretching the vision, it's just almost like being a mirror held up for you to be able to say, okay, well, here's a screenshot, a snapshot, a very unbiased, neutral bird's eye view of your life right now. This is what you told me. This is what I can see. This is where you want to be. And then you can kind of start plugging in and fill in the gaps a little bit and move towards that new person, which is powerful.
And sometimes it can be as simple as that. Like I went to an event a couple of years back, okay? And it was all about like marketing and growing your business and strategies and things like this. And there was a lot of people got up and had like MBEs and stuff like this. And to be quite honest, they spoke a lot of rubbish. They spoke a lot of rubbish that went completely over people's heads, wasn't taking a huge amount of value from it. And there was this guy from the States, Billy Jean. So I'm not sure if you've ever heard of him, Billy Jean Marketing, okay? But a real American. But you know what? He was right up my street, because he got up And his presentation, this guy was paid a fortune to fly over from America, and he got up and his presentation was, stop doing this, start doing this. Stop doing this, start doing this. It was so simple, so straightforward. What's the things you need to stop doing? What's the things that you need to start doing? Because he said it, every single person here right now, you probably know what you need to stop doing. You probably know what you need to start doing. But have you actually ever took the time to sit down and write it? So I'm going to give you a head start. Here's 15 things that I want you to stop doing. Here's 15 things that I want you to start doing. If you do this, it's going to completely change your business. And I says, you know what? If there's one thing I take from this event, I'm going to stop doing the things that he's just told me to stop doing. And I'm going to start doing the things that he's told me to start doing. And even in a short space of time, I know a significant growth in my business. Why? Because I had a simple framework that I could work off. Okay. A little bit stuck. Here's things that I should stop doing. Here's things that I should start doing. Very, very simple, very straightforward, you know?
Definitely. I think something in that context of like what you've said, that I've seen guys who have got really, really good results. A lot of the time, you know, they come at you with these limiting beliefs, excuse of so classic. I work with very busy guys. I'm too busy. And it's like, okay, well, your starting point, rather than us adding loads of shiny objects in, you know, fancy diet program, new training, whatever it is, let's just take some stuff out. Let's free up space so you've actually got the capacity to think, feel, and change. Mm-hmm. And that for most guys is like the biggest, almost, you said, aha moment, where they're like, fucking hell, well, if I stop doing this, I've actually got time to Mm-hmm. And it's when we're looking at kind of like a client journey, if you want to call it, you know, like that first phase is like, it often takes the longest, and guys are wanting to see those results in, you know, as quick as possible in that first phase. But usually it's a really slow curve. And then when they get those foundational habits, that identity shift happens, everything else skyrockets, you know, whether it's relationships, the physique, the profession, because they've created that space for the actual change to happen. And I think that's where some people, well, guys and women, it's not gender specific, but they miss out on achieving a result because they're in, you know, I can't remember what the coaching model is called, it's like the valley of despair, where just before you get to the point of return on your investment in yourself and those building those habits. But so many people just think, oh, I'm not there yet, I'm not there yet, and then they almost dismiss the process and the change that they've tried it and it doesn't work. And if you just keep going that a little bit longer, you know, that's where they're going to get the results. So, I mean, thinking about the future, mate, what's coming up for you in the future? Have you got any physical challenges you're setting yourself, or, you know, what's training looking like at the minute?
Yeah, at the minute, training is really, really good. So I suppose I'm 38 years old now. So I've just actually recovered from an Achilles injury. So the next goal that I'm going to be setting myself is a sub 3:30 marathon. I haven't run a marathon in 19 years. So I'm going to aim for a sub 3:30 marathon. I used to be a very, very good runner whenever I was younger, probably because I was so light. I was so lean at the time. So now I'm 83 kilos. So the last time I ran a marathon, I think it was 70 kilos. The last time I actually ran a marathon, believe it or believe it not, I didn't know what a marathon distance was. So this is some good advice for anyone that is running their first marathon. The first marathon I ever ran, I didn't even know what a marathon distance was. I was training recruits in the army, and my job every single day was just bring them out and run them to the hilt. There was no structured running program. There was no structured training program back in them days. It was just the fittest guy in the platoon brings the guys out for run. So I was bringing the guys out for 10-kilometer runs, hill sprints, things like this. But we didn't have the time to do long distance running. It was just like 10-kilometer runs, 10-kilometer runs. And I remember hearing about a prize for the marathon. I think at the time it was like €10,000 because it was the very first ever Cork City Marathon, which was right on my doorstep. And one of the guys mentioned this in the gym. I said, well, I'm going to do that. I had it in my head. I'm going to win it. 10 grand. Jesus, to go down and run a few miles, I'm going to win this. So I was at the start line. I still hadn't even at this stage researched, because back then this was 2005. You didn't really have access to the internet or anything back then. So I just arrived on the day. I'm looking at sussing guys out. I'm like, who's probably the fittest here? And there was thousands, like absolute thousands and thousands of people enter this, okay? And at the halfway point, I was actually in the top 40 because I took off like the clappers. And then what happened was at about mile 17, mile 18, I just hit this wall where I started to cramp up. You know, there was people dressed up as fucking bananas and everything were passing me out at this stage because I was stopping, I was doing stretches, doing absolutely everything. So I learned some hard lessons for that, and I definitely corrected it for the following year. So yeah, the goal is definitely to just get back into the running side of things and just set myself a challenge from that regard. From a business perspective, we made a big transition over over the last year or so. So there's a team underneath me now. We offer so much more than just the physical side of it. My wife's on board. She's a rapid transformational therapist. So we're helping people to make big breakthroughs very, very quick within the first 30 days. So like the limiting beliefs, the imposter syndrome, the long-term weight loss where they fail time and time again. We're getting to the root cause of those issues very quick. So we're helping people to make breakthroughs much, much quicker. So we have a number of different programs we're going to be rolling out for primarily business owners over the coming months in the coming year.
Amazing. And how can people get in touch with you? What's the best channel to get in touch if they want to reach out for anything?
Yeah, so whether it's Facebook, where we engaged, it's Martin Brady. On Instagram, it's Martin Brady _coach, or we've got buildtolead.official is the new page that I've set up on Instagram. Yeah. On LinkedIn, then it's Martin Brady on LinkedIn.
Okay, I'll put all these tags up when it all gets edited and stuff. But mate, that was an absolute pleasure to hear your story and giving some absolute gems for everybody. Guys, if you're watching this back, it'll be available on Spotify, iTunes, Transistor for the private podcast, and we'll go from there.